Hoje eu tô aqui na Riot para bater um papo com ele, Greg Street, diretor de design de League of Legends. So Greg, nice to meet you. Could you introduce yourself? Say us a little more about your job.
Sure, I really appreciate it. My name's Greg. I'm one of the lead designers on League of Legends. I've been making games for about 18 years now. Been at Riot for about 3 years. Before that, I was at Blizzard working on World of Warcraft for about 6 years. Before that, I worked on a real-time strategy game called Age of Empires, which is my first foray into the game industry. Really love Riot, love League of Legends. We have a great community out there, players all around the world who, we are eager to impress them and not, hopefully not disappoint them. We believe in keeping League of Legends updated. It's a several-year-old game at this point. We want it to last a long time. And so part of that means updating things that start to feel old. So that could mean a champion's gameplay doesn't feel up to today's standards. But we look at that in terms of the art as well. A few years ago, we updated Summoner's Rift, the main map in League of Legends, because the art started to look like an old game, and we think players were worried that, oh, this starts to feel like an old game. We wanted it to feel modern and fresh with more detail and the kind of graphic effects that you can achieve on a computer now. We're doing the same thing right now with the in-game client, which changes all of the user interface that players see in between games of League. Now to do that, it takes both artists and engineers, because you need more talented artists to make trees that look much better than the old trees we had, for example. But we also need engineers who can figure out ways to compress the texture and stream the information from the servers quickly and pull it off of players' hard drives so that there's no slowdown in between. We didn't want the game to run slower and slower as we make the graphics better and better.
How these kind of decisions in artistic things influence in terms of the balance of the game decisions? For example, you guys create something very special for the character and some special power. And how this influence in terms of the balance of the game or this kind of stuff?
I mean, we take the look of the game really seriously. For example, when we're making a new champion, the core of the champion team is the designer, the writer, but also the artist. And the three of those writers work together to kind of develop what is special about this champion. We know it's not enough for them to have really good, fun gameplay, but we also want them to look great, because that really conveys the story of the character. If you look at some of players' favorite champions, they may have nothing to do with the actual mechanics, the abilities they're using, and has a lot more to do with who they are, their personality. A character like Jinx, who's very rebellious, or a character like Ashe, who's very regal, just speaks to different players, and they like those champions for different reasons.
Do you have a special one?
Do I have a special? I mean, I view them all as my children for a little bit. I try not to be biased. We have over 130 champions now, and every new one that comes out is my favorite for a short period of time.
And what's the hardest part to work in making these kind of things? Because the community has a lot of influence in this kind of decisions, what they want, and you guys are used to listen to them. Right?
Yeah, it's really important for Riot to listen to players. We want to be a very player-focused company. We're not the kind of company that says, hey, we're just going to make something and you're going to like it or not. We really try to work with the community to say, oh, are our champions too complicated? Okay, we can make simpler champions. Oh, is a champion now so simple that it lacks depth and replayability? Okay, we've gone too far. And we try to keep players as part of the discussion, because they're ultimately the judge of what's cool or not. We really want players to love League of Legends and keep coming back year after year.
The splash arts that you guys remake, it's part of this kind of influence of the community?
Yeah, totally. I mentioned that we update the map and the client. We update splash art as well. Because the characters in the game are actually very small when you see them on the screen, we use the splash art to really convey the detail and the personality of these champions. So really recently we released Warwick, our kind of werewolf character, who was very old, very outdated in terms of both gameplay and art. And when we did that, we also updated all of the splash art with that champion so that it would feel brand new and modern, and we could have, Riot is able to attract and work with much more talented artists than we used to. So the very old art from 2012, 2013 just doesn't cut it anymore. So now all the splash art is updated with a lot of motion and energy, and paying attention to color thematics and things like that.
Still talking about the community, recently you guys released a skin of Queen Heartseeker.
Yeah.
And had to change some things in her costume and this kind of stuff. There was a reflex of the community, what the community was saying on the social media and this kind of stuff?
Yeah, we do pay a lot of attention to what the community is saying. Like I said, we try to make it a partnership. In this case, what actually happened with the Quinn skin is she was designed to have like these thigh-high boots, yet that didn't work well with her idle animation. She like has a crossbow and bends over and it folded funny. And then also part of this character's kit is she jumps up in the air and flips over. And when she does that with a skirt, it kind of looks not decent. So the artist changed it to give her tights instead, which made much more sense for a very athletic, acrobatic character.
How is working, for example, today, as we were talking before start this interview, how is working with this time when we have a lot of these feedbacks, we have internet, and when you started, we don't have so much feedbacks, I think.
Oh, yeah.
As we have today. How is working at this point on the industry?
Oh, it's so different. Like when I started out, there was an internet, but it was very small percentage of the community would post on like our internal, forums. And you'd get a little bit of feedback, but a lot of it was you would release a box product and then you would see did it sell or not. And based on how well it sold, you would try to reverse engineer what players liked about it or not. And that could just be like, maybe it had a good marketing campaign, maybe it had a catchy title, you just don't know. Nowadays, there's such a tight connection. Players will let me know, they might finish a game of League and immediately send a message to me on Twitter of like, hey, this part was frustrating, could you fix it? And you multiply that by all the numbers of players around the world, and that's a lot of feedback constantly coming in at us, and we have to sort through that, decide, is this an isolated voice? Is this a controversial topic? Or is this something that, we're starting to hear a trend, and if we don't take steps, it's something that's going to affect a lot of players. And then we spend a lot of energy trying to figure out what's the right balance there. Are we overreacting? Are we trying to make something too broad appeal? For example, it's not important that every champion we release is going to be loved by every player out there. Some of them are a little different. Ivern, the big tree guy walking around through the jungle, we know that's a niche champion, and that's fine because there are enough champions in the game now that everyone should be able to find someone they love.
When you guys release something on the beta, how is the process to get these informations from the beta and take these information and get in a real thing inside the game?
Yeah. So we have
process.
Yeah, an early way to gauge community sentiment is to release content for testing on the PBE, the public beta environment. And that lets us do a couple things. It's great at finding bugs because players will report bugs when they see something like, it could be as simple as like, oh, there's a missing texture here, or it could be, you said that this champion's W does this particular thing, but it actually does something else. So we catch a lot of bugs. It's also just great for feedback. Players can say, oh, I'm confused by this mechanic, or I find it too frustrating to play against this champion you updated. And we pay a lot of attention to that feedback. We get information from players reaching out to us directly. In North America, they can post on the forums and we can read it directly. If it's in other regions like Brazil, we have our Riot office there that can take all the community feedback and make sure that we understand that players in their region may be having a different reaction than players in another region, and that's really important to us because we want to be a global game with players all around the world. Now again, it's not, players aren't ordering up a menu of like, hey, you need to change this, you need to change this. It's a discussion that we have. We also do these small surveys where after a game, players may get a little survey from Riot saying, hey, can you tell us what you think about this champion update? Do you like the art we made in this champion? Do you think it delivers on the personality? And we use all of that to kind of make sure that we're trending in the right direction and doing the right kind of things. We try not to be data-driven. We gather this data, but then we use our own judgment and experience and our own, when we play the game, do we understand what players are saying? It's really important to stay in touch with the community and not just look at the numbers that come back and say, oh, players aren't excited about this champion, that means we need to do something else.
What's the hardest part of making your job?
I think the hardest part is a lot of our job internally is building alignment. Like, Riot is not a super hierarchical organization. We give a lot of individual agency to every Rioter, which works great because when people are passionate about what they're doing and then they know that kind of it's their responsibility to ship something great, they take it very seriously. On the other hand, it's a large organization and we're trying to do a lot of different things, and so we have to have discussions all the time of what is highest priority. As an example, for a long time we didn't prioritize a practice tool very highly. Like we thought, hey, we may do it someday, but it's not top of our list. And players spoke out, and they're like, no, we think this is really important. If you're calling League of Legends a sport, sports have the ability to practice goal shots or to go to batting cages or driving ranges, and that players thought that League needed a practice tool as well. So, in patch 7.3, we're going to release a practice tool out to players so they can try to get better at League before they jump into a multiplayer game.
The last question, what's the secret of having a game being a success for a long time as League of Legends?
I mean, I don't know if there's a real secret to doing it. I think you have to always take it seriously. You can't ever consider something finished. Like when we ship a feature, whether it's a new champion or something as large as the client update, we don't consider that like the end of the project is shipping it. That's kind of halfway along the project. And then you have all this follow-up to do as you find bugs, as you find, pain points. We call them ear flicks sometimes, just these little annoying things that we know we could make the experience better. You have to stay humble. You can't ever imagine that you know what's right. You may have a great idea, but once it gets out there in front of players, you're like, oh, this was a mistake. Why didn't we see this? And then you have to change it. You have to be willing to admit when you're wrong.
Muito legal o bate-papo que a gente teve com o Greg Street, mas ainda mais legal foi o tour que a gente pôde fazer depois da entrevista. Infelizmente a gente não podia gravar nada, mas a gente pôde visitar um pouquinho da estrutura aqui da Riot Los Angeles.
Cara, eu acho que essa, sem dúvida, é a sede de empresa de games, ou mesmo de tech, mais legal que eu já visitei. Eles mostraram todas as áreas internas da empresa, óbvio que não a parte onde os funcionários trabalham, mas deu para ver bastante da infraestrutura e do suporte e das condições de trabalho que a Riot dá para os funcionários, que é bem legal.
E a gente começou visitando uma área ali com várias máquinas, que é justamente porque às vezes o cara tá programando lá, tá fazendo o jogo, e ele não consegue sentir como isso vai chegar no usuário final. E aí eles disponibilizam logo pra galera ali num lugar super bonito, com estátuas, isso que é muito legal também. Cara, estátuas por todo lugar, né?
Parece uma Lampare, são várias máquinas, áreas de desafio, tinha vários funcionários testando, ou seja, a gente não consegue mostrar, a gente consegue falar da experiência. E aquilo que o Luciano falou, várias estátuas muito, muito legais ao longo do escritório. E um dos lugares muito legais que a gente viu e que chamou bastante atenção foi a arena, né, Luciano?
A arena muito legal, que inclusive os caras modificaram recentemente aí um pouco da arena. Ela foi dividida agora, tem duas arenas, na verdade, uma menorzinha ali, só que ele explicou que a questão técnica é basicamente a mesma, mas a maior, ela realmente impressiona. Várias telas de LED ali muito bonita, com uma arquibancada muito grande, até antes caberiam 300 pessoas, explicaram que eles diminuíram um pouco agora para dar um ar até mais intimista ali, para alguns convidados poderem assistir as partidas. A área de jornalismo ali, para os jornalistas assistirem as partidas simultaneamente, que está rolando nos dois estúdios.
E agora imagina a situação. No Brasil a gente faz vários eventos, a própria Riot faz vários eventos em estádios, etc. Aqui nos Estados Unidos as ligas menores acontecem aqui, dentro da sede da própria Riot. Imagina que sensacional é você ir jogar um campeonato onde o jogo é feito.
E a gente estava visitando a arena e é legal que assim, a gente estava lá, a gente entrou, tal, começou a ver as instalações e aí começou a aparecer um monte de pro player andando ali. Que já, então, na verdade, eles criam até uma estrutura para os pro players, salinhas separadas para os caras aquecerem ou treinarem, uma sala só para os caras ficarem, assim, é todo um ambiente para os pro players ficarem ali e só focarem dentro do jogo, isso é legal.
Impressionante que uma empresa de um só jogo tem uma estrutura que você sai daqui depois de uma visita dessa e pensa, pô, seria legal trabalhar aqui.